We have done our project on designer babies. This is the first section, being the contemporary problem. Many of you have heard of designer babies, but what are they really? Well, by definition, a designer baby is a baby that has been genetically engineered in vitro for specially selected traits, which can vary from lowered disease risk to gender selection. Or in other words, scientists are able to modify the genetic material of babies to give them desired traits. Some of your first thoughts about this might be, oh, they can eliminate diseases from a baby before it's even born. That's amazing. Or, nobody should be allowed to choose what their baby should look like. Those are two of the most disputed ideas regarding the issue of designer babies, making this a highly controversial topic, since the ramifications of this technology doesn't only affect the baby. The question is whether or not this research will benefit society by advancing scientific research or harm the individuals being treated. When I first heard about designer babies, I was only thinking about how this technology could affect the baby's life, either good or bad. But it doesn't end there, which further complicates this issue. What I had not thought about initially is, how does this affect their families and society in general? For the baby, eliminating the disease could be great for them by allowing them to live a healthy life. But what happens when that child gets to a stage in their life when they're ready to have children of their own? And this is where the effect on society comes into play. When they decide to have kids, some of their own modified DNA will be passed on to their child and their child's child and so on, which kind of leads to eugenics, and that always hasn't been a positive thing, such as Nazi Germany, for example. Another huge concern that is related to designer babies and ethics comes into play with regard to politics and religion. A huge portion of our planet's population believes in some religion, and many of those religions would have the people believing in them to disagree with genetic modifications for various reasons. For some, the argument being that a person's genetic makeup should be left up to God. This ties directly into politics because of the laws that are governing this research. Considering that some parties have tendencies to be more religious, it just adds more gas on the fire. So now we know what a designer baby is and why it's such a controversial issue. So it might be worthwhile to summarize the pros and the cons. What are the benefits? You could prevent your child from having a deadly disease. For some people, a benefit might be that you could choose their physical traits such as height, weight, or maybe even strength. The technology being developed could also have potential to help other areas of science and further advance our society, technologically speaking. And what are the drawbacks? Creating new issues with families' lineage that might not have been thought of well enough, which can have large implications on a society as a whole. And there are also moral concerns with altering someone's DNA with regard to consent and well-being of that individual. So why are people so concerned with this issue? The main reasons stem from religion, moral reasons, historical issues, and those related to Nazi Germany, and from those who want to have this advancement in science. While having this technology in the right hands can do great things, it may only take one bad egg to do some serious damage. This technology is advancing very quickly, so it's just a matter of time to see how it all plays out.
This is Part 2, Historical Context. Adam Nash was born August 29, 2000, and was the world's first designer baby. Nash was a product of in vitro fertilization, or IVF, and pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, PGD. He was to be a donor without a disease-causing gene for his sister Molly. Molly, without a transplant of bone marrow, would die before age 10. When the word designer baby comes up, we often think about making the perfect baby. This is not how it used to be. Before designer baby, it was called savior sibling. Savior sibling is the description given to a child born with the intention of providing a cord blood donation to a relative afflicted with a blood disease. The problem today about designer babies or savior siblings is how the media portrays them and how society thinks about it. Society thinks it is a problem that could get out of hand because we watch movies like Frankenstein or other movies that have mass-produced humans take over the world. Now, this is all science fiction. Having a good grounding in what is true and untrue is crucial. We can look back in history and find out where all the commotion started. Even though genetic engineering began in the 1970s, it really didn't start to take hold until the English eugenics movement led by Sir Francis Galton in the 1880s. Galton stated that the reason that upper-class individuals' socioeconomic status was higher was because of a superior genetic makeup. From this movement, many states began to enact marriage laws with eugenic criteria prohibiting anyone who was epileptic, imbecile, or feeble-minded from marrying. After World War II, Hitler's ideas of eugenics impacted the society of America, and the eugenics movement was lost for some time. Since the technology in genetic engineering was newly developed, it replaced sterilization. The concerns that designers' babies brought today are mainly science fiction. According to Hank Greenlee, the director of the Center for Law and the Biosciences at Stanford, we're never going to be able to say honestly, this embryo looks like a 1550 on the two-part SAT. Human traits are not simple. A straightforward human characteristic like height could be influenced by as many as 93,000 genetic variations. Now, a real problem many scientists agree to is where this is leading. With the rise in technology, it could eventually lead to gene enhancement in humans. This is what everyone is worried about. It is not real yet, but over time it is a possibility. That is why it is important for scientists and ethicists to help people when needed, but not to the point where it could create inequities in society. Designer babies is not limited by technology, but biology. The origins of common traits and diseases are too complex and intertwined to modify the DNA without introducing unwanted effects. The regulations we have today on genetic engineering are not over the top. In fact, many scientists and ethicists alike feel there is a middle ground. As of February 2018, only 4 countries have done gene editing on humans, which includes China, Sweden, the UK, and the United States. All embryos are never allowed to mature and were for research purposes only. Regulations differ in every country, but for the most part they keep scientists in line with good oversight. Before 2015, the United States and several other countries put a restriction or ban on genetic modification of human embryos. In December 2015, the National Scientific Academies of the US, UK, and China held the first ever international summit on human gene editing, where they acknowledged that basic and preclinical research is very much needed. However, they were told to proceed with extreme caution. Perhaps the biggest challenges that scientists face are ethical concerns. Genetically modifying one gene in the human genome can have unforeseen consequences. Another issue is that gene editing can continue to advance to where scientists can create real designer babies. This means that physical traits can be created, therefore allowing class differences to take place. One of the most obvious concerns is the role scientists play. Do we allow them to play God? In turn, is it a necessary part of the advancement of genetic engineering?
Hello, my name is Stephen Thompson, and I will be doing part 3, which is reframing the issue. That is the topic of future scenarios involving designer babies and the effects it will have on society moving forward. It is highly probable that designer babies in the future will become something that only the wealthy can afford due to the high cost of technology when it is starting up. An example of that today is like space flights and SpaceX, where they're hoping it will be a luxury thing people can buy and go up into space. Babies are not yet there. Designer babies, that is, are not there yet ethically, as they are still being debated in courthouses around the world. So we can't look at anything currently going on to project the future, but we can look at their trajectory and guess as to what is happening. One example of what is going on in the courthouse today is the Council on the Ethical and Judicial Affairs released a statement in 1994 in support of using genetic selection as a means to prevent, cure, or edit specific diseases, but that selection based on benign characters was not ethical. That means we can remove diseases currently, ethically, but anything else is seen as unethical. That raises the question of, what about disabilities like ADD, dyslexia, and other characteristics? Are those okay to remove? And what diseases should be allowed to stay? Which brings in a religious topic of playing God, which is currently what is being debated. It is also a humanitarian discussion of, is it humane to allow babies to be born with diseases if we can prevent that? The negative impacts on society are more theoretical issues, as designer babies are not currently happening, but one societal issue is that when you start editing genes, if you lower one like HIV, it has been shown that you would raise the risk of succumbing to West Nile virus. Similarly, for type 1 diabetes, it raises the risk of Crohn's disease. So then, the societal differences between cultures and countries with West Nile virus would mean that they could lower their AIDS risk while other countries could not. This could lead to furthering culture and geographical divides. It could also allow people to pick or gamble what diseases they would like more. For example, if AIDS versus West Nile virus. If you don't think you're going to get somewhere with West Nile virus, you could lower your risk of AIDS. What does this mean for humanity as a whole? If we can lower diseases, what if it turns out we're able to pick genders? What would that mean for places like China, where having a son is more desired than having a daughter? Would China no longer produce women? Then there's the issue of, will countries share their information for genetic editing? If someone figures out how to make a stronger person, will they keep that information or will they share it to the world? They start keeping the information where we end up with a super race, which is what Nazi Germany was trying to do. Currently, though, it is being shared and is dramatically accelerating biological discovery by sharing throughout the world. This is a graph that shows CRISPR titles and articles, and as you can see, it is rapidly developing. So we are not entirely sure where we're going yet, but it is clear that it is on the rise and still developing. Since it's not clear the direction we're heading, we'll have to look towards countries with strong science beliefs to lead the way, who have less ethical quandaries.